than copy that. Different than invisible disabilities or less visible disabilities. So there's a lot of interpretation, but what I'm laying out in these slides to follow is, I believe, a framework for how you can identify when to engage people about comments or behaviors that might be offensive to you or just not sit right, and how to engage them. And then at the end, I'll talk about different ways that you can build a practice and learn from your past experiences. So, and like I said, it may not work exactly how it has for you as it has for me, but I think that I'm laying out a framework that's that you could use to build on. So all this stuff, yeah. Yeah, so of course, if something I say feels like something that you just could not do, don't force yourself to do it. I don't think there should be anything that really forces people to be in difficult situations. But of course, my experience is my experience, and your experience is your experience, and there's a lot of variation. So let's see. Let's just start off with defining what is a disability. It's kind of ambiguous. There are legal definitions, and there's economic definitions, and there's functional definitions. There's like the medical model, the social model, and the money model. And so just to illustrate this, Social Security defines disability as being incapable of substantial gainful activity. So merely a definition based on how much income you produce. And for reasons that don't entirely make sense, that works for Social Security. But what I'm talking about today is more the social model. A lot of our interactions are with different people versus institutions, and people might say question something or call you disabled or handicapped, and that's more of a social interaction. So I pose it. We all agree that you can have a hurt foot and walk with a bit of a limp, and not maybe be considered disabled by most people. But at some point, it's more you're more considered disabled with a physical limitation. But I think there's no clear and hard line what that is. So, and it might. I know sometimes I've had days where I was feeling great, like feel like I'm walking good, and somebody says, "Oh man, you're walking really bad. What's wrong? What happened to your leg?" And it's just like my perspective is that I'm getting really great, and then their perspective is they don't know me, and so it's all relative. So and also I will point out that walking with a cane makes people look twice, but a car, everybody has a car, not everybody, but in a car, nobody thinks of a car as an accessibility device, but it absolutely is. Like, nobody's going to carry 4 bags of groceries 15 miles home without a car, or an elevator. Nobody goes up. Well, I mean, some people do, but most people are not going to go up 40 flights of stairs without an elevator. So in reality, the identity of disability is defined by society and in some ways architecture, and what structures are built and based on the standard assumptions about typical mobility. And then if you fall outside of that, you're disabled or whatever. So there's no real clear definition. There are absolutely definitions of disability. I just don't think that they encompass all of the identity of disability. So as with all things, the way we talk about things shapes the way we think about them, and our thoughts influence our actions. So for this point, language matters. For this presentation, I'll go back and forth between person first, person with a disability, and disability first, disabled person. I used to be squarely in the person first camp, and there's a lot of literature that requires you to be person first for a lot of research publications. But some friends of mine who are also, well, who are both professors. I'm not a professor. I just work at a university. But they have convinced me that the identity first is an accurate way of, since, as I was talking about, society interacts with me first as a disabled person, um, not as a person, and then, I mean, largely not as a person, and then some when I have a disability. So when I meet somebody I don't know on the street, they're seeing me as a disabled person, not just a person who has a disability. So, but I'll go back and forth, and it's fine to do to use whatever language you want. I would just encourage you to think about why, and you don't have to have an answer, but just think about the type of ways that you refer to yourself and other people with disability. And it can be helpful to put some thought in that. There's no right answer, though, of course. And I'll just add this. Personally, I don't really connect with the term survivor. I don't feel like my injury or my disability is something that defines me. I know in society it does in many ways. And a lot of people like survivor is empowering, and it's a term that resonates with them, and that's fine too. I would just encourage you to be thoughtful about how you refer to other people. And also, this is just something that kind of bothers me. Disability is different from handicap. Handicap is an external barrier or limitation. So using the term handicap to define somebody, handicap is like a barrier. Like if I'm trying to walk down a path and there's a wall in the middle of the pathway, the wall is the handicap. It's like impeding my progress. I'm not handicapped. The wall is the handicap. So I mean, it's I guess there are some situations where handicap, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I know it gets used a lot. I don't know. We have, how many people do we have here? 22. It's a bit. I was going to have an introduction exercise where people introduce themselves and not as a disabled person, just talking about something that they like or something they experienced. And since we have so many people, I don't think we have time for a minute for each person to do that. So I would just want to ask you if next time you are in a situation, a meeting or a group or whatever, and you are introducing yourself, to not define yourself as. A lot of times people say, "I'm a car accident," or "I'm a fall off a ladder," and like nobody's a car accident. A car accident is a thing that happens. People are people, and you might be a person who experienced a car accident, and it might even change your life, but you're not a car accident. And so I just encourage people to kind of distance themselves from that, defining your identity as this injury, because you're somebody who's bigger and broader than just something that happened to you. Even if that thing did change your life, it's not the only thing that defines you. It can be a core part of your identity. That's fine. But it was just an exercise to so just moving forward as you in the future, potentially maybe think about if you do find yourself at meetings saying, "I'm in a car accident," think about being I saw this good movie. It was really made me think. So it's just a thought. Of course, do with any of these things what you want, and none of them are orders. Let's see. So, okay, yeah, here's the outline. I kind of talked about this a little bit already, but in this presentation, I'm going to talk about the different groups of people that we'll interact with, and the different ways that they can interact with us. Mainly I'll talk about microaggressions because I think that encapsulates all the interactions that are assumptions, meaning people making assumptions about what we are, what we can do, who we are, what we want, based on just the identity that they perceive us as having, as like, if I use a wheelchair, people interact with me differently than when I'm using a cane, which is, I'm the same person. So it's they're interpreting me as different because I'm presenting with this. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly I'll talk about who the people are, meaning the different situations you encounter people, and the different things that you can do, the different ways that you can respond to people, whatever it is that they're saying. So that's 1 and 2, and then no, oh, sorry, did I go back here? And then 3, we'll talk about how to learn from what you're doing. So this is a very, I want to think of it as a proactive presentation, teaching you a framework for moving through society. We're not going to change society. I mean, at this scale at least. However, we can change the way that we feel about the way things, the way people in society interact with us, and how we respond. And doing that and keeping track of it can help us grow and become better at navigating these situations. So that's the hope. And of course, like I said, this is all just based on my experience, and I've also been a patient advocate, and so my experience includes other people's experience. And I co-teach a class in the summer for healthcare providers, done research and interviewed, maybe interviewed some of you for my research job. And so it's not just my experience. I'm just not just my perspective, but my experience is informed by more than just my experience. But like I said, some things may deviate from what I'm suggesting, so be aware of that. I just want to pose some questions, since these are things that I, after my injury, which is more than 30 years ago, well, no, almost 30 years ago, I had a lot of questions about like, why do people only engage with me as a disabled person when I'm me, and I don't feel like I'm just this disability that everybody seems to see. And so I've read a lot about it. There's so much more to read, but I've read several books, and there's this Beatrice Wright, I believe. Yeah, that's not important, but she came up with this model, or these definitions that there's 3 reasons people engage with you, not like a person and like a disability.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Did somebody have a
There we go.
question? Did anyone have a question? No, okay. Oh, people are putting, that's great. Yeah, if you want to put introductions in the comments, that's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so the first reason that people engage with you is because, or not the people engage with you as a disability, is because they perceive your situation as an impairment, and they see themselves as like normal, and so they imagine, what would it be like to be this person who I perceive as impaired, and they subtract what they see your loss as or your deficit as from their existence, and they say, well, oh man, for example, somebody who's walking, seeing somebody in a wheelchair, thinks like, oh, how terrible would it be for me not to be able to walk, and I would be really upset, and then they project that loss that they imagine onto the person in the wheelchair, and that's not accurate. I don't know if I'll have time to get into that later, but it's not accurate. I mean, briefly, most people who have an injury return to their baseline level of happiness within a few years. If they're a happy person before their injury, after they go through the stages of grief, they end up being a happy person again. With, of course, a few exceptions. But so that's not a correct assumption or assessment to say this person has this perceived deficit and they are living life as I would imagine the loss. And so they say, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss or whatever. And you're in the wheelchair, I'm in the wheelchair. I'm fine, thank you, it's fine. And so, but that's, and then the other one is that people are insecure in themselves, and they see somebody with a perceived disability moving through society, confidently or competently or without seeking constant assistance, and it makes them uncomfortable because they have some insecurity that they are secretly or openly displaying or whatever, and they feel threatened by somebody who has a clear deficit, while they are secretly harboring some anxiety about a deficit they might have or perceive in themselves. And so they are threatened by the confidence of somebody who's like clearly inferior. And so it might make somebody say negative things or be more ridicule you aggressively. Or this is rare. I've experienced that, I believe, once or twice in like 30 years. But it does happen. And then the third thing, which is actually more common than the second one, is that people think everything happens for a reason. So this will manifest as people saying, well, you know, you wouldn't have any challenges that you couldn't overcome, or there's a plan for you, and this is just a challenge you need to overcome. And I mean, that's because they have a worldview where everything happens for a reason. And so there's the three reasons that people, and then of course there's just like people have assumptions about people with disabilities for political reasons, whatever. Like maybe think, oh, you're faking a disability, or you have a disability but you don't want to work. I know. So there's a lot more, but I think these are the three general things. And the first one, where people overemphasize, that's not necessarily a negative, because they are seeking to understand somebody. So usually, if people like this project their beliefs of your disability onto you, and you end up becoming close with this person, they'll grow during that process. The other two, it's not terrible, but the other two options, they may not have that exact path. So on the next slide, I know I'm talking a lot, but that's, I guess, why we're here. Should check the chats. Oh yeah, impact wise, yeah, that's you're not alone in that. So I read a book called "So You Want to Talk About Race" by E.G. Lewell, and I don't have the link, but it's really good. And she has a section on microaggressions. It's not a book about disability. There's a brief section where she talks about disability in terms of race and intersectionality. But that book where she described microaggressions is when I said, oh, I'm experiencing those all the time. I'd heard the term microaggressions, but I didn't really put it together that was something that I experienced. So briefly, microaggressions are tiny aggressions. Micro means small, obviously. It's a term that was first coined in the 70s to describe subtly aggressive language directed to African Americans. But since then, it's become something that has been kind of expanded to use to mean language or behavior directed at any marginalized group based on sexual orientation, identity, race, gender, education, body image, all kinds of like native language, all these things. So it's micro because they're small, which means that they're hard to identify. You might say, well, why is this person saying this to me? Is that just how they talk, or are they just saying this weird thing to me? And that it makes it hard to address them. And if you do call it out and say, hey, I don't really appreciate that, they say, what do you mean? I'm just complimenting your hair or whatever, like, for example. So it puts you in a difficult situation, and sometimes they can kind of really sit with you. And that's something that everybody experiences based on, I mean, everybody has some identity that gets othered in some way, I think. And so everybody probably experiences microaggressions at some level. But there's three different types of microaggressions. There's micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. And on the next couple slides, I'll go through usually just on the next single slide, I'll go through all. Micro assaults are just what you think of as assaults. In terms of disability, it'd be like saying, calling you a cripple or something, like, which used to be the common way that people refer to disabled people. Now it's pretty, I don't appreciate it. I mean, that's an understatement. Or other slurs, or or micro insults. So micro insults, these last two are a little more common, I think, for people with disabilities. So these are demeaning or degrading comments rooted in, and of course, my Zoom window is blocking. Rooted in. Trying to move it. Here we go. There we go. Okay, you got it. Got it. Demeaning or degrading comments rooted in a belief that white, cisgender, heterosexual, able-bodied males are supreme. So that's a mouthful, but that means if you're a person of color, or if you're disabled, or if you're a woman, or trans, or a different identity that's been othered, these are insults implying something subtle or not so subtle about you based on, and they're microaggressions. So again, it's hard to call out. And then micro invalidations, these are typically socially or environmental or interpersonal messages or cues that serve to negate the validity of experiences that deviate from what's considered normal. Think of a bell curve, which is, I'm not getting into that, but that's also got histories in eugenics. A bell curve, but like most people have abilities within this top part, the broad part in the middle, and then some people, for example, think of somebody who's really tall, a normal doorway is an impediment to them because they have to bend over and they have to hit their head, or and then people who are shorter, smaller, also have limitations because everything's, so people who are in this normal range of height are in this big, thick part of the curve. So micro invalidations might be like holding an automatic door open when there's a button and it's holding, like I know that the door is open, I don't need it, but that's just, I mean, doors come up a lot.
Silas,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. We have someone asking if you could um, sometimes take pauses a little more often since they're
Oh,
having a
sure.
hard time keeping up,
Sure.
or slow down, but whichever is more comfortable for you, but just giving them a little more breathing time to digest
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Sorry, I go pretty fast.
Yeah,
Do we
it's
want
fine.
to do we want to stop? Is there anything that anybody wants to get clarification on at this point? I mean, these are things that could be new to a lot of people, and it. I always do this, like I do this presentation, like this is an entry level thing, and it's actually quite dense. So if anybody wants to get clarification or more elaboration on anything, you can, I can stop at this point. We can take some questions.
Also, everyone, you are definitely welcome to still unmute yourself and ask questions if it's something that you really want to get asked before he moves along to another slide or something. We definitely encourage you to submit questions via the chat so that everybody can see them and recall them. But those are both options. It's yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going through a little bit of chat. There's a lot of messages. Um, oh, Emma, yes, go ahead.
Just wanted to ask you, what about when people ask you things like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do something like that? What were you thinking? What kind of aggression is that?
Um, I mean, well, like, I always think of questions about your disability like as like different forms of what's wrong with you. Do you mean about behaviors, or like I don't know if I totally follow the question.
Well, there are sometimes like with aphasia, if I get my words mixed up,
Mm.
or if I misplace something, if I forget the word for something and I just stop mid-sentence, or if I space out on somebody, some people get really freaked out and then they ask me or make these comments like the examples that I just gave, like, what's wrong with you? Why would you do something like that? Hello, were you listening to me? And it's a little bit, it feels aggressive to me because it feels kind of like they took it personally.
Yeah. I mean, one of the microaggressions, it's somebody who's being inconsiderate about your disability or how you're acting. In a lot, I mean, I think in many ways, a microaggression is something that you experience as a microaggression. It may not be intended to be such, but if it's something that you experience in that way, it is. Um, so I don't know that it's super important to like people to define it. I just think that knowing that it's a microaggression, for me is enough. Does that kind of answer your question? I'm sorry, I can't be more specific.
Yes, thank you.
I think Holly was the first hand up, and then Isidore.
Hi, Silas. Thank you. I just have a quick question. I'm 2 years into a brain injury right now, and and some days I speak better than others, and some moments I speak better than others, and sometimes I don't. Do you think it's better to announce, please be patient, I have a brain injury, or is it better to just try to be and then figure it out after? Is there a better way to do it, or is it just kind of play it by ear?
Um, I mean, I would play that stuff by ear. Um,
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you need to do. I think you could do different situations if you find, and towards the end of the presentation, I'll talk about journaling to like learn and keep track of your progress and kind of grow from your mistakes and successes. Um,
Okay.
I think if you find that there's interactions, for example, say you're talking to a healthcare provider about an issue that's not your brain injury, and you feel like you're not being understood and they're kind of rushing through things, and that's a situation that you can kind of identify as a reoccurring thing, um, then it might be something that you benefit from saying, like, going in this appointment at the beginning of the appointment, say, like, I do have a brain injury and I want you to know that I'm really attentive, but I might pause when I'm speaking, or I want to take longer to respond to questions, or um, so it's important to me to understand. I mean, just but I don't think it's necessary to tell everybody passing the street I have a brain injury. I mean, so somewhere between there. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you. That's actually, I just assume doctors always know, but that's actually a good point. They aren't going to always know what your limitations are. So that's probably a good
Yeah.
idea to say, give me a second to think about it or process or answer, because sometimes my thought gets lost in the process. So thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah.
And yes, you did answer my question. So thank you.
Yeah. And many doctors may know, but also many doctors may not. A specialist might have some other specialty, or doctors are people too, and some people suck. I mean, I don't know. So some doctors suck. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, in my experience, most people who are doctors are pretty good. But yeah, Isidore.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to comment um, like I really hate when people act so surprised that I take pride in the way that I look and I dress up and I dress really colorful, and being a disabled person of size in mobility equipment, people act like they've people act like it's such a shock that we put on makeup and dress up really nice and feel good about ourselves, and then they always say the word like, you're so brave, or like, like you're doing such a good job pulling that off. I could never pull that off, you know? And it just feels so disgusting to me. And then I also want to name that, like, I cannot tell you how many times people try to open up automatic doors for me and do things for me that I am perfectly capable of doing for myself. And I often say, that's okay, I got it. But like at some point, I'm just like so angry, I can't, and livid, I just can't even talk. And it's just like, I guess I'm wondering, is there an eloquent way to like handle that besides just like yelling like I got it? Because it's like they don't want to listen, and I try to say it in a normal voice and then they still do it, and then I say it louder. I'm like, I got this. Like,
Mhm.
and there's times where I snap on people and I'm like, look, I didn't ask for your fucking help. Like, I got this. Like, I would ask you if I needed your help. And
Yeah.
I don't want to like, I don't want to like be mean to people because they're just trying to be nice. But I'm just so sick of people assuming I can't do things for myself.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot. And I don't know, I think having a mobility issue just means the doors are always a thing that people get weird about. Like people running ahead of me to get the door when like I'm not even going to the door, like but yeah, I have some comments, but I'll just jump ahead right now and say, be assertive, and don't say something like, "Oh, you don't need to do that." I was saying, "You don't need to do that" for a while, and people would say, "Oh, I don't mind. It's my pleasure. I want to help." And so say assertive, "Please don't do that," or, um, I mean, and that's yeah. I mean, I think if you remove any ambiguity, and these are things that I suggest people practice so that when you're in a situation, you can be calm and having like maybe even role play, like with somebody that you're comfortable with, like go through doors and have them run up and like try to get in the door and be like, please don't do that, or whatever way that doesn't allow any wiggle room to where they can't say, oh, I
Do you,
don't mind, you know.
do you think it's rude to say I don't need your help?
I don't, but I think many people do. I say that a lot. Like people say like, "Oh, take your time," because I walk slow, and I'll say like, "I don't need your permission." And then they're like, "Well, like I
Good
mean,
point.
but but I think it's hard because there's a bit more of a burden on us as people who are like othered by society to be nice to people who are othering us, because they mean well, and that's something too that they mean well and they don't want to, but you also don't have the energy to turn everybody who wants to be an ally into like a close confidant. Um, my suggestion, and this is gonna be something that you find, whatever works for you. But I would say, like, what works for me is like when people like will ask about my injury, and I'll say like, I don't want to talk about it, or I don't know you, I'd rather not talk about it, or I don't have time to talk about it, or it's not something that I want to talk to you about right now. Thanks for the question. It's just not, and I just don't have the time. Um, and then if it's somebody in public, they'll say like, okay, like yes. Um, but with the door, like I'll say, please don't do it. I do also sometimes say I got it, but I've noticed that people continue to do it, like, oh, I don't mind or whatever, like, yeah, like, because they think that they're like still helping. But I think if when I say please don't do that or please stop, like sometimes people come up and push my chair with me.
Oh God.
Yeah, and I'll say like, please just stop, or like, or I'll say like, help, I'm being kidnapped, but that's not actually gonna like people don't respond well to that. But it's funny at the moment. But yeah, I just say like, please stop. And probably maybe a few short phrases like please stop or please don't do that, or um, I mean,
I, I've also had people like when I tell them to stop, they like get offended and then they kind of treat me like how dare you, or like that whole like beggars can't be choosers or
Yeah.
something, you know,
Mhm.
mentality. And I'm just like, so it just makes me feel like like they treat me like I'm just less than them, you know,
Yeah.
and that they should be so lucky to have the pleasure of their help or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know if you've read it, but there's a book, Sitting Pretty, um, and you should check that out if you haven't read it. She talks about this exactly, um, and I want to get because I'm going to touch on some of these things more with the upcoming
Thank
slides. So
you.
yeah, no, thank you. These are great questions too. But I want to get Lori and Sarah's question too. Lori, I think, is next.
I just wanted to give a quick comment. I was thinking a good response could be something like, no thanks, I want the opportunity to do it myself, or something like that. So you're quickly, not that you need to explain to anyone what it is, but some people respond better if they understand. I had we were working with somebody at one point, few years before my injury, and they were really afraid to go in the elevator and wanted to do the stairs, and so was asking the gentleman if he could, find a way to get the stairs open for her. And he said, I just really don't want to take this opportunity away from you to, face your fear here. And I think that's maybe something we could kind of think about and apply to some people this way if they're pushing too hard to help us when we don't.
I
That's my
mean, sure.
comment.
Yeah, and things are gonna work differently for everybody else. Everybody is gonna have their own situation. I do think that it's not our job to have to justify why we're independent. But I mean, if that's, I think what it all comes down to a lot is if you feel comfortable saying what you're saying, then you'll exude that comfort, and it will mean that you're more successful in your action. I personally don't want to have to say. But if that's a strategy that works well for you, or other people, I also think like it's kind of weird. I don't know if I'm understanding the story correctly, where the person was afraid of using the elevators. They asked to have the stairs open, and then the guy refused and said, "No, you should face your fear in the elevator." That's not necessarily his place to say like, "Oh, if you have some fear of claustrophobia, now's the time that you have to do it. Just unlock the door, like let him use the stairs."
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it was a mental health therapist who was working with the
oh, well,
person.
that's slightly then it's been different.
Yeah. Um,
But yeah,
yeah, and I think just, and I my style of interacting with people that I'm most comfortable with is not to be um I'm I can't figure out the word.
you mean
But I
confrontational?
don't want to respond sharply, or I try not. I'm not comfortable when I respond to people angrily, so I
Yeah.
do try to find other ways to say things so that I feel comfortable and good with what I'm saying.
And that's excellent. I think that's my goal in this is to just kind of lay out the framework, and then hopefully you can plug in the pieces in ways that feel comfortable and that work for you. So I encourage everybody, like if what I'm saying sounds too assertive or not assertive enough, or too direct or indirect, or whatever, like, but it kind of gives you the gist. Of course, modify these things or disregard it entirely. That's fine too. Sarah, you,
Thank you, Silas, for taking my question.
of course.
I think everyone's going to have their own way of doing this, and I appreciate all the questions because it gives me a chance to think about how I might respond in a different situation than I've already experienced. And I thought what Lori said spoke to me for my own reasons. When she said, no thanks, I want the opportunity to do it myself. For example, when a caregiver is dressing you, and maybe you can dress a lot of parts on your own, and you want to become and feel and grow into being more independent. That would be something that I would be able to say to that person, rather than just stop, and they're not understanding because they're used to doing it for people who you know who need to be fully dressed and can't speak up for themselves. But then when they come upon someone who's trying to be more independent, they don't know how to do it. So I thought that was a good comment. And I think for me, I also want to be able to connect with whoever I meet, and I feel like I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're there to be kind to me, and they may not know what they're doing or they're saying that it isn't helping me, but they don't know that right away. And so anything I could say to that would give them a little bit of a clue about myself might help them learn not to do it to others, even if they, just to do it with me. So in other words, I'd love to come up with a phrase to say where they would get it. And so, like in some way that doing it myself um, helps me get stronger, or, something like that. Or, I, I, I can do this. I can do this thing easily. Thank you for offering.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to do it myself. Something like that.
And that's great. And I mean, many of us are already doing a lot of these things, and like learning from what works and what doesn't work. And a lot of this, many of these questions, I think I'm gonna get into in the next several slides. But I want to make sure that we get through the next few, and get Jessica's question, and then take a break, and I can answer some more questions at the break, and then hopefully we'll have time at the end for, because this is. I'm about to start getting into that in the framework. But Jessica, please go ahead.
So I just had a comment that other people haven't raised yet. I think a lot of this with microaggressions and addressing them is picking your battles. I've learned that it's just not worth my energy, or it's going to take more energy to stop and try to educate a random stranger who may be really genuinely trying to do me a kindness, than it is to just sort of say, thank you, button my lip, and just go on, especially if it's something relatively minor, like holding a door open, which honestly, I genuinely do appreciate. Part of it, most of the microaggressions that I personally get are whether my service dog is real, because with my brain injury, unless I'm speaking, it's not necessary, or actively having a problem, it's not necessarily immediately obvious that I'm not just training a dog for somebody, as opposed to, no, this is my dog. But I also have to say that when it has gotten to the few times that it has gotten to be more of a confrontation, the service dogs that I have been very large German Shepherds, and people do not tend to confront you if you have a large German Shepherd who is obviously highly trained by your side.
Yeah.
It does tend to increase my sense of safety when I'm engaging with strangers, because it's kind of, I feel pretty vulnerable if it's just me and my cane. But anyway, it's just, I think you're absolutely correct. I agree. Microaggressions and how you deal with them is very personal and very situational. But I did just want to make a comment about, I think everybody has to evaluate whether this is a battle worth fighting right now in that moment with the level of energy you have. And what is the benefit of this if it's somebody who you're probably never going to see again, versus somebody who you engage with on a more regular basis, then it is worth taking the time to educate and spending that energy. So just a comment.
That's an excellent comment.
I could babble on about this for a long time.
That's an excellent comment, Jessica, and that's actually exactly what is coming in the next few slides. So all these questions and comments are just on point, like really kind of set up the next part of the presentation, really well. So thank you for all these comments and questions. I'm going to go a little quickly through these next few slides. And a lot of things, these are things that we've already touched on. Like, why does it matter? Why do microaggressions matter? We should people say like, "Oh, just let it go," and you know, eventually you can. Some of them you can, some of them you can't. But it matters because you know we all, if you think about like have our power, our energy, moving through society is going to cost us a little bit more energy than somebody without physical or invisible disabilities. So experiencing a microaggression, if you're just like, was that really, or like, do they just always do that, or what does it mean? Like that also drains a little bit, and so we have to be able to determine when do we spend the energy to say like, hey, when you say that, it makes me feel like this, and like, don't do it, or I would appreciate if you did this, and then because invariably when you say that, they're gonna say, well, I said it because of this, and I assumed this, and then so then you have like a conversation. You have to unpack. You have to see the other person's perspective. So you're right. Jessica's right. You don't want to do that with a stranger. It's just not worth your time. You could. You'd be like the most magnanimous person, like going out and like educating all the strangers in the world. But nobody has time for that. So what can be really helpful is if you predetermine how and when to respond. Like you think about who am I going to say stuff to? Like the question about the doctor's office, or the question about microaggressions, and I guess the example I gave was the doctor's office. And say, in these situations, I will say this if it happens. And in these situations with these people, I'll say this if it happens. And then you can say, I can ignore this stuff or whatever. Just because, well, I'll get into these the next one slides, but I think, should take it. Well, I'm gonna. Oh, and the other thing that matters. I don't know why I have this highlighted. Maybe because it's important. Because if somebody, I always think of it as when somebody says a question to me or a comment to me about my disability in public, I always kind of think of them as saying like, "What's wrong with you?" It might be like, "How long are you gonna be like that?" Or "Were you born like that?" Or "What happened to your knee?" It's always "What's wrong with you?" Because they're not really asking what happened, or like I guess sometimes they are. And also, what happened is like what's wrong with you too. So, and if you just kind of say like, "Oh, I don't want to talk," like, "Oh, on this thing, I'm busy," like, well, I guess actually, despite the voice I was using, those are like saying, "I don't want to talk about it. I'm busy." That's you taking control of because they're saying, "Can I have something from you here?" And you're saying, "No, I don't have it. I don't want to give it to you. I don't want to give you the information you want." But if you say, "Oh, like give some kind of meaningless answer," then you're kind of giving them a little something, and well, what does that mean? Like, so if you switch up and take control of the interaction, and say like, "I don't have time. I'm on my way somewhere. I'm busy." Then you're basically like deflecting their thing. And so there's different ways you can do that. And yeah, so we already kind of did questions or comments. I think we should take a break now. And we'll come back and I'll kind of go through the framework. But good news is a lot of stuff that we've already talked about is setting up for the framework that I'm thinking about. And then I'll go through. So can we do a 15-minute break so we come back? And I'll stick around and we can do more. But we'll start the presentation again at 3:13. Does that work?
Works for me.
That's
That's
great. Thank
perfect,
you.
Silas.
Thank you, Silas.
Yeah, I'm here if people want to ask questions though, so feel free to turn your mic so that we can chat. I'll even turn off the.
All right, I'm gonna pause the recording and then I'll resume it when we come back.
Yeah. All right. Everybody can see this still?
Can see
Okay.
it.
Yes. Yes.
So as I was saying before, you can, in broad terms, divide all the people in the world into 4 groups. In this situation, I mean, which for anything really, they're strangers, people who you don't know, won't know, aren't likely to see again. There's no real benefits like spending a lot of time like changing their hearts or minds unless you're a political candidate. And there's second degree and retail. Second degree are like friends of your neighbor or you know, like your partner's distant cousin, you haven't met it once or twice. You might have some loose connection to them. If you think of it as a neighborhood, like strangers are people who live away from where you live and you don't know. But the second degree in retail, people are like people who live in your neighborhood or a few blocks away. You don't see very often, but you might have some. Specifically with retail, like if it's checker or whatever, you might have the same interaction with them in controlled circumstances over a few different occasions. At second degree, are like friends of your friends, like, you know, people who live in your distant neighborhood. And then gatekeepers. These two squares are blue because these are where I would suggest that as you're practicing learning how to interact with people and advocate for yourself, that these are the people that you focus on. So gatekeepers are like retail, might be the phone service person or that schedules your appointment when you call in, or somebody in Social Security. People who might sorry, I'm not gonna get distracted by the chats just yet. Come back to them. Gatekeepers are people who control or might influence your access or your outcomes. So if you're scheduling an appointment, person on the phone schedules your appointment, what you tell them is going to influence who they put you with, what provider, and how long the appointment is, and when you get in, or that kind of stuff. So they have some of your outcome in mind. And then this green square is your providers, your family, friends. These are all the people that we really know. And these are the people that it's worth spending the time to educate, and because not only do they influence your outcomes, you care about them and have strong relationships with them. So my dog is barking. Somebody's probably closing a car door outside. Okay, so and then there's 4 things you can do, and it's just a coincidence. There's 4 and 4. They don't line up that way. You can ignore people when they do things or say things. This is the easiest thing to do. It doesn't really work if you're stuck in a room with somebody. You can redirect, which is just like changing the subject. You can educate somebody. This is a high cost thing because it's a conversation. You have to unpack the issue, explain your perspective, listen to their part, and sway them and get them to basically get on the same page and change somebody's mind or have them understand, you know, on the situation. And this in the red is ridicule. And that's a way you can respond to people, and it can be utilized effectively, but it's not a go-to. You should, if you're just trying to start out like advocating for yourself, you shouldn't start out like getting sassy with strangers, because that can backfire. So a little bit more on each type of person. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because we've covered a lot of this stuff in the questions and discussion we had already, and I'm making sure we have time at the end to discuss more. So strangers, there's just some reasons that you don't want to spend too much energy on educating or trying to convert strangers into friends. I mean, if they're cool and you like their hair or whatever, sure, like maybe you can become friends with a stranger. I've definitely met strangers and become friends with them. But often it's not worth it to spend your time. If somebody in Costco is like, "Why do you walk like that?" Like, you're never gonna see that person again. Just move on. Just say, "I'm shopping, don't have time," and then leave, and then the interaction's over. So you know, you can rewrite them if you're stuck in a room or in an elevator or something, or you can ignore them with a simple "I don't want to talk about it," or "I'm sorry, but I don't have time to talk." And like I said before, on language, be clear and assertive. Don't say "I'm really busy," or actually "I'm really busy" is good. I can't say it wrong. Don't say it's a long story, or I can't even think of anything. But I used to say stuff like that. Like I used to always say it's a long story, and everybody would invariably say like, "I have time," and like, but I don't have time. Like, well, when do you have time? Like, And just if you say I don't want to talk about it, then that's black and white, and they get it. It's done. They may not like it, but then it's done, and you leave it. It's over. So like I was saying before, with doors or whatever, like you say, oh, you don't need to do that, or if you say that, like, oh, I don't mind, or I want to help, like, because they're using their perception of your disability as a way of like boosting their self confidence. Like, I'm a good person, and open doors for disabled people. Like, I'm just not. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to be the object of your boosting your self esteem. So I say, please don't do that. And then if they do, then they're defying the interest of somebody. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people go that far into it.
Hey,
You
Silas,
can, yeah.
really quick, before we move too far away from when you categorized in relationships with people, Barbara asked, where would you categorize professional colleagues for those who are working or volunteering, disclosing the work environment for those who have non-apparent disabilities?
Well, that's a good question. So if you're volunteering, you're working, and they're colleagues that you already work with, and your disability isn't a factor in your employment or the benefits you get, which it can be if you disclose in an interview or something. Like, there's different strategies for that. So I'm just talking about people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, and if they fall into that like colleague or but I think it's um in some situations they're gatekeepers. In some situations they could be like second degree or just like friends, like, like Lewis in accounting doesn't do anything, but you see him at the coffee machine on set. I know we're not in an office account, but like, for example, like, so Lewis in accounting would be like a secondary connection. Um, but if you see like all those gatekeepers, maybe Lewis in accounting is close friends with your boss, and like they golf together, and like they talk about everything, and like if he likes you, then he could be a gatekeeper. But if you notice, they're both blue. So I think that they kind of both fall in the same category, being like worth. And also, the reason these are kind of safe squares to play in is because there are some social and often structured norms that influence the responses that people can get. Like, there might be, I mean, if it's like your cousin's friend's husband or something, you have a connection with him. Like, if he's a jerk, you can't like go to his boss and be like, this guy was a jerk to me. But Lewis an accounting, you'd be like, home dude always like pushes my wheelchair, and I don't like it. I tell him to stop, and he says, I'm helping. And like, you can be like, there's recourse in some of those situations. So that's why they're similar. Does that kind of get to your question, Barbara?
Yeah, I appreciate your response. I think one thing that I've been working through is disclosing to my manager and my team that I work with just directly, and using it as an opportunity to educate them. I work in a large company, so the fact that there will be others with disabilities or which are permanent or situational is very likely. So I see that as an opportunity for me to help inform them how best to work with me. And I think that that's my role also as a teammate, to let people know how best to interact with me, and for them then to also perhaps consider that when they're working with other people within the company. And that way, if I do need extra support at any point in time, I have an ally within my work environment, as opposed to, and I like to establish that type of a rapport and relationship after I've demonstrated my abilities, so I don't get stigmatized of not being able to do my job, but before I really need support. So that's kind of already out in the open. I guess so I almost would put people that I work with on a day-to-day basis in the friends and family category, because I do interact with them every single day.
Yeah. And if there are people that it's worth it to you to spend the energy, and they do control influence your outcomes, they are the friends, family provider. And so, I mean, that's The only reason I'm putting that in its own category is because like the time that you want to spend to have meaningful interactions and promote meaningful and deep understanding in those people, it's costly, and that doesn't mean it's not worth it. But you have to budget your time for it, and like you do have to. You can't just say like, well, this is how it is, and like I'm not hearing your thing. They have to say, well, you're opening yourself up to questions and dialogue in that situation. And like maybe it's something where you end up saying like, maybe we could make a DEI like a group, and I can be on that. Or like maybe you can lead that. I don't know how some big corporations aren't into that, but you know, I mean, if you want, you can get my contact information from the Brain Injury Alliance, and we can chat more if that's something that will be helpful to you. Not that I know the answers, but like I love having discussions like that. If you wanna continue talking after the presentation. So these slides are more information about each of the different types of people. I think these are pretty straightforward. And these are talking about the different ways that you can engage them, and then it's helpful to engage them. Secondary acquaintances in retail, you can redirect them. That's like just changing the subject if they say something, and that can be powerful. Like if there was a grocery checker who we had a friendly conversation, and then one day he's like, "How are you getting around today?" And I'm like, "How are you getting around today?" Like, I don't want to talk to you about like I'm walking. I want you to bring up my hummus. So they can be especially equally capable of making ignorant comments, and the time it takes to like break things down to them and educate them, especially in some controlled circumstances like in the cash register. I don't have time to educate this dude about why what he's saying is problematic. I just want to shut it down. I redirect it, or I can ignore, change the subject. That's redirect. I could educate, but like it's not worth it to me in that situation. They can make inappropriate small talk about disability. These are just ways that people could put things onto you. This is a favorite. I'm sure we all love this, where somebody is with you and they get engaged and like, what does your friend want to drink? And then like, why wouldn't you just ask me? My girlfriend, sometimes people ask her what I think, and I'm like, ask him. Like, so that's like the epitome. And then gatekeepers is kind of the same thing. They're gatekeepers because their judgments or assumptions can actually have tangible effects on your outcomes. Talked about this. Advocating within this group can be tricky, but since they can influence your outcomes, if somebody, the example that I give is, I was at a medical appointment, and the clinical assistant checked me in, took my blood pressure, asked if I was in any pain, asked what level my pain was, and instead of saying on a 1 to 10 scale, which is what the clinic I was at uses, or 0 to 10 scale actually, says your pain mild, moderate, or severe, and I said it's mild, and then she wrote on a star in the computer 3, and I said, well, how did you get a 3? Because I would have rated it like a 1. I just had an achy wrist or something, and she said, well, that's within. I said, but the scale of 0 to 10 just has to be the scale. And so on some level, you have to kind of know what's normal or what to expect in those situations. And then when they deviate from that, like, you have to politely be like, well, why are you saying that? Like, because if my pain is rated higher, then that could cause the doctor to treat me differently. And I mean, it's a subjective scale, so it's already flawed. But that's just an example of advocating. Like, many people would just say, oh, well, that must be what mild is. And in that group, in a higher level, like interactions or just disagreements, you might want to just talk to a clinical manager or somebody like somebody. I know that's nobody wants to be like, let me talk to your manager, but sometimes in situations it's not going to be productive to address a situation with person doing the thing. And then we already know a lot of this stuff. Yeah, Jessica, what's going on?
So just one thing that I haven't heard so far, it's a real balance for me because I feel that it's very important that I try to remain polite about this, about any response, especially if I'm trying to correct behavior that's bothering me, is trying to figure out how to be polite but very firm about things, because I don't want to give somebody an excuse to complain about me. Especially when you roll with a big service dog, you don't want anybody to have the excuse to bar you because of your dog. I imagine that it's, when I was in a wheelchair, it was sort of similar that way too. You don't want to give people the excuse to sort of say, oh, well, this person is too much trouble. I just want to, not ignore, just make them go away, because then I don't have to deal with that problem.
Yeah.
So strategies for how to be polite and firm about this would be helpful too, because I like a lot of what you're saying, but some of the responses I think people could choose to be offended about, and I'd hope to avoid that.
Sure.
And I'm going to close my volume off because the puppy has decided to be vocal.
No, that's, our dog is the same way. I'm surprised she hasn't only barked just once. Yeah, and that's important too. Like I was saying in the beginning, some different styles will work for different people. And I do, despite the fact that I come across as being I do try my hardest to be polite, but sometimes, when I'm, and it might be a cumulative thing, maybe I'm going through a lot of doors that day, and I have people trying to hold on the doors and I don't need it, and then by the fifth time somebody's getting in front of me to open the door and in my way rather than helping, I'm just like, can you move? And they don't know that I've had that interaction 4 other times. So there is a big burden on us to be polite, and yeah. So I guess, and that's why it can be helpful to do pre-planning and plan out. And I think that okay, so this slide is pretty straightforward. Talked about a lot of stuff. And I'm not going to go into too much since we're pretty deep into the meeting already. These are self-explanatory. If anybody wants explanation on these, I'm just going to go through them quickly. Redirect just change the subject. It can be powerful, but sometimes people don't want to do that. Sometimes people will keep coming back to the question. Typically avoid ridiculing people. There are situations where you can ridicule somebody in an informative way, but you want to kind of maybe have a feel for who it is. I think don't ever try to be rude or ridicule somebody in public, even though that might be what we feel like we want to do. Like when somebody says, "What's wrong with you?" You're like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" But often somebody who will say something like that might not respond positively. So avoid that. But I mean, it's one option and it can be done in productive ways. It's just hard to do, or more challenging. And then educating, we've talked about this a lot already. Educating, it takes up the most time. It has the best outcomes because hopefully if you educate somebody, they have their heart and mind changed and understand, and that leads to different behavior and a stronger interaction, strong relationship with you and them. It could be a range of things. Also, if you're educating a caregiver about something that they're doing, caregivers, and I know this, caregivers can feel really like they lose identity when their whole role is to take care. Big part of their life is taking care of somebody else with a disability, and so when then you as somebody with a disability, a disabled person, critiques the way that your caregiver is giving you care, it can make it feel like you're not appreciating them. So be kind if you're critiquing a caregiver. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to say, when this happens, it makes me feel like this. It just also means you need to listen and hear, because it is a give and take in this educating people about things. It's a conversation. It's not like a monologue. you know, so sometimes it's easy to educate. Like I was I think some actually Brain Injury Alliance presentation, and some guy behind me like moved my chair so that he could see better. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I just couldn't see." And I was like, "You can't just move my chair because I'm in your way. I'm in this." I don't know. And he was like, "Sorry." And I don't know. At that point, I was just like, "I'm not really caring about your interaction." Can I? Is it really pressing? Is it, or can we get through? Because we almost have.
I
Just
can
have.
save it until the end.
Okay, we just have a little bit more to get through, but you get first, and then so educate. And then here is just 3 tips about how to have an effective confrontation. We all intuitively know this already. You have to tell the person exactly how they made you feel or what happened made you feel. Tell them the specific thing that they did or what happened that made you feel that way, and then tell them the impact of your action. That's just how you make somebody work to make somebody, to help somebody understand that an action that they did that may not have been intended to hurt you probably wasn't, or to offend you, like might have offended you. So that's just a tip for part of educating. Talked about this a lot. I already said it's good to have a simple get out of jail free card for strangers. Just say I don't want to talk about it. It's great. It shuts down most any conversations, and people like actually when I've said that, people are like, oh God, I feel it, and they're embarrassed. Like, oh, I asked something that was inappropriate, and you actually kind of feel bad for them. I did in those situations, but it's good because at the end of the conversation, and then you don't have to talk about it. So here's the strategy that I would suggest: pick 1 or 2 groups. I think the gatekeepers and the retailer and secondary contacts are great to focus on, and then plan an interaction. Like you can write out different things that have reoccurred or different types of interactions that you feel like the door thing is a great one. Like something that happens regularly that you felt like it's been a struggle, and write down a lot of different strategies, or just do kind of a brain dump of different ways to respond, and like write them down, and then you can try different ones and see, okay, in these situations this works better, in these situations this doesn't work better, in all situations this works, and you can do that with different types of, and as you get comfortable with asking people not to open doors for you, you say, like, for me what works well is say, please don't do that, and most people say like, just like go to the door and walk away, like, because I mean, I think they're maybe embarrassed. I mean, oh, please don't do that. And like I say it politely. I don't say like, please don't do that. I say like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Oh, I've got it. And then people will stop or go in or walk away. And then, so for me, that works really well. It may not work well for you, or maybe there's something that works better. But so, and then as I'm more comfortable with those interactions, I start to get into more bigger, more less defined interactions, like insisting that somebody can open a door for you is pretty well defined. And then also like, here, let me help you with your chair. That's also a very discrete situation. Like it's got a start and end, it's clearly defined. And so as I get more comfortable with those, then I might say, I'll work on when people say, can I help you, just randomly in public, and like say like maybe saying, no thank you, I'm fine, is a way that, so then you can kind of expand what you're in. So you may not have at first the perfect response for how to respond to people in every situation, but write out a few different strategies to try. And this is where journaling comes in. If you're not journaling, I find it really helpful for learning any new thing. You can journal, what's going on and what happened and what the outcome was, and then you can keep track of things. And then after a week or so, you can go back and like review things and say, oh, I noticed that in these situations, when somebody said, can I help you with anything? And I said, no thank you, I'm fine, for example, that may not be the best one, but like say no thank you, I'm fine, people just effed off and walked away. And that was what I wanted. And then so that's my thing that works. But maybe I had to get through like asking for help in a comical way, or saying like, do you have $1 million? And like people like, nah. Like I don't know, maybe so that maybe it is a good strategy. But so you can find out what works and like write in your journal like your strategy for accomplishing whatever outcome and whatever interaction you want to have, and then talk about how it went, and then you go back through and see if, and then I noticed trends like on sunny days people were more friendly, which is probably to be expected, but stuff like that. I think I'm gonna, yeah. So, and then also, you're not gonna have interactions that are worth writing in your journal every day, because sometimes we don't interact with people we don't know, and the people we know typically are pretty normal with us. Or normal is a weird word. Typically people we know are act in a way that's expected with us. So, some suggestions about building a habit of daily journaling can help it be that you have a practice of writing your journal when you get something that is significant to write in your journal and record. So it can be easy, just like write what you weigh, what you ate in the morning, when you got up, what you did exercise, movies or shows you watched, something you do every day. If you listen to music every day, just like write down something. It can be just 5 minutes, and then you already have a practice of going to your journal. And then we're like, oh man, this was a weird interaction. You can go down and write it out and say, what happened? So somebody like started pushing my wheelchair, or somebody like insisted they get the door open, or they're like held the door open more and like standing in the doorway so I couldn't get through. And I was just like, I can get the door, can you please just move? Or an interaction that didn't go well, or an interaction that went well. And you can kind of explore what happened and look at as you get things down on paper, you get more insight about the outcomes and the components of the interaction, and you can develop that more. I think this is the last slide. Oh yeah, repeat. Oh, this is the last slide. And then as you go through and review your outcomes and notes in your journal, you can like draw conclusions. Like I like to go through a journal every week or so and say, what were themes, what were my conclusions, and what's the summary of what happened, and what are the conclusions I can draw. And then maybe after a month or like 3 months, you go through and just read those weekly summaries and say, okay, so what are the big summaries of the last 3 months, and what are the conclusions I can draw from the whole time. And you'd be surprised to like how it helps you not only remember things that you might have forgotten, because like we kind of glaze over trivial things, and I don't know, maybe like the first time your puppy learns a new command is like, but you're not gonna remember that forever. But if you write it in a journal, like, oh, I remember that, and then you kind of get to experience that happiness and satisfaction again. And so same thing with going through and having a habit of journaling daily. All right, I've talked so much. And then one final thing, actually. You can, on top of summarizing and reviewing your conclusions from your journal, you can talk about the conclusions or challenges or struggles or successes in a support group or with a counselor. So that's all my thing. I'm sorry, I feel like I talked so long. Thank you all for listening. I'm here to stick around for another half hour, 15 minutes, as long as people want to. And then, of course, anybody can get in touch with me. Feel free to get my information from Ninja Alliance. But Isadora, I know I made you wait. I would love to hear your comment or question.
Thank you,
no worries.
Silas.
Sorry. Yeah, so I was just gonna say that like when you were talking at some point about people touching your wheelchair, I I wanted to say that like I've in the past like have had people like lean on my scooter because like they're tired. Oh, you were talking about when somebody moved you because they couldn't see. Like I've had people like if I'm standing in line and like the person behind me like doesn't want to be on their feet, they like lean on my scooter without asking me. And it really offends me. And something that I've heard in the past that I really identify with is that telling, and you could tell people if you want to or not, but like if you use a mobility device, an assistive device, that is actually considered an extension of your body. And so when people touch your mobility device, they're actually touching your body without consent.
Yeah, I do agree with that. It's weird. I don't feel like my wheelchair is my extension of my body, but that's probably because I only use it part of the time. Um, like for example, if somebody was like touching my cane, I'd be like, knock it off. But I also do know from many people who that's their primary way of getting around. So yeah, and that's, I mean, I did mention it, but I guess I just assumed everybody knows that, but clearly people don't. I'm sorry that happens. That I can't imagine people just like leaning on your scooter, like. I mean, have you tried to say like, oh, it's go ahead, it's fine, I'll let you lean on me, or how do you handle those interactions?
I just say like, please don't touch my scooter. Like this is actually part of my body. And like, I didn't tell you you could do that. So unless I explicitly tell you you can do that, please don't.
Yeah, I think that's even better than what I was saying. That's great because it's assertive, it's direct. It's not really confrontational. I mean, other than the fact that like people who feel they're doing something that's inappropriate are probably always going to be a little bit defensive. But you can't always be responsible for people. So I mean, I think that's great. Like, Jessica, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, I get that. When you roll with a service dog, I think the things that I have plastered all over her vest: do not distract, do not pet, do not separate dog from owner, are probably the people don't read. I think it's, they just see, oh, really cool dog, obviously friendly because it's in this space where dogs aren't. So I'm always having to tell people, please don't touch my dog, she's working. And then they say, well, she's not doing anything. And I'm like, yeah, she's helping me balance right now. And I don't want to fall down because she's distracted. But then, when I usually the people who do that are the least willing to listen to any explanations because they just want to pat the pretty German Shepherd. It's hard to know what to do. I mean, honestly, that's been, I start off being polite, but at a certain point it's like, get off my dog or don't touch my dog. It's sort of a different confounding than the wheelchair problem. And now the candidate puppy is starting to get restless again, so I will mute myself.
So before we continue, I just wanted to say formally thank you, Silas, for having this class for us. It's been incredibly insightful for me, especially. I am also part of the community, but I am pretty able-bodied, so I know that even I have done some of those things that we talked about, and I think we're always a work in progress. But I think it also is up to us to make sure we want to continue spreading that awareness and being true allies and not just talking the talk and not walking the walk. So with that, I am going to just say somebody asked if it was possible for you to share the slides following. If so, I'll just add them to a post next week for people to be able to access. But I'm going to stop the recording.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say share the slides. I don't know if you have sent out that document that I sent to that can be shared as well. It's like the 7-page thing. It has a lot of the same information. I'm sorry, I was going through it before the presentation, and I was like, I should really reformat this, but like, I didn't have time to reformat it. I
A
should
lot
make
of
it.
information. It's a
Yeah.
very thorough presentation. It's
Well,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I hope I didn't like just put too much on anybody. But also on your note about like, I've done it too. Like I remember I was at a restaurant and there was a dude in a wheelchair, and I was like, oh, I use a wheelchair. I wasn't in my chair, and he had like mountain bike tires on his wheelchair, and I was like, I really just wanted to ask him like, are those specific to a wheelchair, or are they just normal bike tires? And like, I went up and he kind of waited and waited, and he was out of a conversation, and like, I knew he knew I was there, but like he was intentionally like not engaging me, probably because he felt like I was gonna do some weird disability microaggression, which I absolutely did. I was like, "Oh, your chair is cool. Like, are those normal? Like, are those mountain bike tires?" And he's like, "Yes." And then just like went back to his conversation. And I was like, "I'm a terrible person," but I didn't say that. And I was like, "Okay, thanks," and like just walked away. I was like,
Yeah.
"Why did I do that? Like, I know they're clearly mountain bike tires. Like, I just have to be like, I also know about wheelchairs." And I feel like that a lot of people do that. And they're like, I saw that you're disabled, and I like had to
Trying
say
to find a way to
something.
connect somehow. Yeah.
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 He didn't want to connect with me, and that's fine. Like, cause I was only trying to connect with him over like also using a wheelchair, and like he doesn't want to do that, and that's fine. I wouldn't want to do that either.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I'm sorry that your cousin hurt his ankle when you were in 5th grade. Like, that's not something that I can bond with you over. Like, that's a true story.
All right, well, I'm going to
Yeah.
stop the recording now. Thank you everybody for joining. We can definitely continue, but I'm just gonna get this stopped so I can upload it in the next couple hours. It will be available on our YouTube channel. Brain Injury Alliance of Washington is committed to providing free and accessible education to share with the public. So every class we've had in the past is also available on that YouTube channel, and I highly encourage people to check it out. So maybe give me a couple hours to get it posted, and then it'll be up for review. Okay.